Welcome to this overview of the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention on Stolen or Illegally Exported Cultural Objects, an international treaty protecting cultural property. The Convention formulates uniform legal rules on the return and restitution of cultural objects with a view to mitigating the illicit trafficking in cultural objects. It aims to modify the acquirer's behaviour when acquiring, inheriting, or receiving as a gift a cultural object, introducing the principle of due diligence. To fully understand the scope of the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention, we must understand its origins. In 1983, to look into the criticisms then being made about the drafting of the UNESCO 1970 Convention, in particular concerns raised by certain countries regarding the pillage of archaeological sites, UNESCO asked UNIDROIT to cooperate on issues such as good faith acquisition and other differences between jurisdictions, which made it difficult to recover cultural objects which had been illicitly transferred. The provisions of the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention were meant to supplement UNESCO's 1970 Convention principles and to remedy to its shortcomings by formulating minimal legal rules on the restitution and return of cultural objects. Together, the two conventions are compatible and complementary, providing a cohesive international legal response to the trafficking of cultural objects.
The convention was adopted in Rome on the 24th of June 1995 and entered into force on the 1st of July 1998. It establishes two fundamental mechanisms. The first important mechanism of the 1995 convention is the restitution of stolen cultural objects. Article 3 of the convention states the mechanism that the possessor of a cultural object that has been stolen must return it, wherever stolen and even if not inventoried. This provision allows for a fair and reasonable compensation only if the possessor can prove that he/she exercised due diligence at the time of acquisition to ensure that the artifact in question was not of illicit origin. This mechanism constitutes one of the most important legal rules in the fight against the illicit trafficking of cultural objects. The burden of proof being on the possessor, Article 4.4 of the Convention determines what is due diligence. It encompasses all the circumstances of the acquisition, and in particular the character of the parties, the price paid, the consultation of any reasonably accessible register of stolen cultural objects, and any other relevant information and documentation which he/she could reasonably have obtained. What is requested is an active behavior of the acquirer. The Convention provides for an obligation to which collectors, museums, and art dealers already subject themselves: the obligation to duly inquire about the origin of a cultural property offered for sale.
The second important provision concerns the return of an illegally exported cultural object. An object legally temporarily exported but which does not return under the conditions of the permit is deemed to be illegally exported. Article 5 of the 1995 Convention foresees that a state whose legislation prohibiting the export of an object has been violated, and which will establish that the object was of significant cultural importance, can obtain the return of such object. The possessor has the right to a fair and reasonable compensation by the requesting state, at the condition that he/she neither knew nor ought reasonably to have known at the time of acquisition that the object had been illegally exported. To assist states that claim ownership of archaeological objects in another country regarding undiscovered archaeological objects to have strong legislation, UNESCO and UNIDROIT drafted in 2012 model provisions on state ownership of undiscovered cultural objects. These model provisions are intended to assist domestic legislative bodies in the establishment of a legislative framework for heritage protection, to adopt effective legislation for the establishment and recognition of the state's ownership of undiscovered cultural objects with a view, inter alia, to facilitating restitution in case of unlawful removal. As a soft law tool, these model provisions are intended also to facilitate the application of the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention, in particular Article 3.2, and the 1970 UNESCO Convention.
Launched in 2017, the UNIDROIT Convention Academic Project, UCAP, aims to increase awareness and knowledge about the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention. Through publications, events, lectures, and collaboration, UCAP supports scholars, students, legal professionals, and art market actors in strengthening implementation practices and building knowledge around restitution frameworks. UCAP was acknowledged in 2024 by a resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations as a platform for the exchange of views, information, and assistance on issues such as the ratification and implementation of the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention on stolen or illegally exported cultural objects. UNIDROIT plays a central role in providing a comprehensive understanding of the implementation of the 1995 Convention through a wide range of activities, including advocacy, international conferences, university lectures, and webinars. These initiatives also offer a comprehensive understanding of the principles and mechanisms of the Convention's provisions.
In parallel, UNIDROIT actively promotes tools developed by its partners which help to implement the Convention's principles, specifically on due diligence, such as the UNESCO Database of National Cultural Heritage Laws, Interpol Database on Stolen Works of Art and its app, or the ICOM Red Lists of Cultural Objects at Risk. These are essential resources meant to accompany individuals, museums, law enforcement agencies, and art market actors to exercise their due diligence duty, reinforcing preventative measures and enhancing vigilance against illicit trafficking. The analysis of the Convention shows that, from an international perspective, the compromise reached represents a balanced solution. Not only does the Convention effectively combat abuses committed in the international trade in cultural goods, but it also contributes to increasing legal certainty in the circulation and trade of cultural goods worldwide. For international art traffickers, however, it is undeniably an obstacle. It will be increasingly difficult to exploit the differences between national laws in order to obtain a valid title to cultural property stolen or otherwise removed from its owner. The Convention marks a turning point in establishing a stronger and more coordinated response to cultural property misappropriation. The Convention, supported by its global partners, reflects a shared international commitment to cultural property and heritage protection. UNIDROIT encourages all states to consider joining the Convention and contributing to a unified legal framework that protects cultural heritage for future generations.
Learn more at unidroit.org.